Well, welcome everybody to episode 50 of Late Arrivals. We figured we'd kick off another milestone episode here with another special guest. We are joined by Chris Peters of Flow Sports. If you guys have not seen any of his work, he does a lot of pre-draft rankings and mocks of pretty much anything under the sun when it comes to the draft prospects. We're very thankful to have you on. How you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you guys. Yeah, it's off season. I'm in off season mode. I'm just like not even shaving anymore. I'm just kind of phoning it in appearance wise, but aside from that, I'm doing all right.
Awesome. Well, for those that may not be familiar with what you do, if you'd like to give the folks at home a little rundown of kind of your history with the draft. I know I saw you used to do play by play and stuff. You seem you've been in the game very, very long time.
Yeah. I think pretty much my entire professional career and adult life has been involved in hockey in some way, shape, or form, which is pretty awesome. Feel pretty lucky about that. Yeah, I mean, as far as getting involved with covering hockey and covering prospects, that goes back. I got lucky enough out of college to get an internship with USA Hockey called the Brian Fishman internship and working in their communications department. And so that's where I got my first start. So, you get your foot in the door there, and job opened up at the National Team Development Program to do communications for them right as my internship was wrapping up. So really good timing for me. And then I got there. They hired me to do that job. I was there for a couple of years, and then my wife, actually, who's an engineer and like way smarter than me and better than me and like just everything, she got a job back in Iowa. She's originally from Iowa. I went to school out there, and I was like, oh man, well, I guess there goes my career. so um so that turned, I was looking for jobs. I'd only been like working full time for 2 years by that point, and there just weren't a lot of jobs in hockey around here. So I started a blog called the United States of Hockey, and that's where things kind of snowballed. I had some obviously unique knowledge of USA Hockey and national teams, World Juniors, the process of developing prospects, and being at the national team program, saw what it took to be, for these top tier guys to make it. And so that unique insight allowed me to do a lot of different things. And I continued to work kind of on a freelance basis with USA Hockey. I do like play by play at the World Under 18 Championship, when you could only find it on pay-per-view streams, and now it's like on NHL Network and everything. So but we were basically just doing it for the parents, and they'd send me to all these great places and go do that. And eventually I got a job at CBS Sports. They were looking for somebody that kind of knew prospects. Funny thing about that was is that job, I got that job, and then the lockout in 2013 happened. So that was awesome. Or 2012. Yeah, 2012. My son was born in 2012, and like the next day, I think we found out there was going to be a lockout. And I was like, oh, well, do I still work here? So yeah, so I got that job, was really lucky to do that. And then as all media jobs eventually do, my contract was up and it wasn't renewed. And so I decided, oh, that's it. I had a good run. Worked at the University of Iowa for a little bit. And then I moved. I got a call from ESPN saying, hey, Corey Pronman just took the job at The Athletic. We're looking for a new draft guy. And I got the job. So I was there for 3 years, and then the pandemic happened. I lose that job because that's what happens in media. And then started my own thing for a little bit, did Daily Face Off with Frank Saravalli for a year, and then got contacted by Flow Sports because they wanted to really get hockey content going. So, in some way, shape, or form, I've been involved in covering prospects for over 10 years. I've been around junior hockey, U.S. national teams, all that stuff for about 15 years. And, it's just kind of the way I see it is like, I could either get comfortable and do something where it's stable and safe and everything else, or I can continue to do this wacky world of sports media. And I just have too much fun doing it. So I just decided to keep it going that way. So it's a long story. It's been a winding path. Really happy to be at a place where, hockey is growing and that they, want to put a bigger emphasis on hockey. And obviously, this is a place where not a lot of hockey fans are familiar with it yet, but hopefully through my work and certainly with the games that we stream, because primarily we're a streaming service, games like the ECHL and the USHL, and we'll have a whole bunch more coming next season. But there's being part of something on the ground level for once, as opposed to getting hired by a prestige media company, which is awesome. No, I'm not going to complain about that, but to be here for this and help it grow is really outstanding. So I'm really excited to to kind of take this to the next level. And coming off of the draft, just had a great time with it. So yeah, it's been a long, winding career path, but I guess I just gave it all to you anyway. So so
Hey,
yeah.
I was gonna say, looking at Flow's website, the next thing on the schedule is the Beauty League
Yeah.
games. And those are
Yeah.
always interesting to see, because those are always the NHL guys getting back into shape for the summer. Yeah, had their
Yeah.
fun. Time to get back
Yeah.
to working out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, last year, the games, one thing I didn't appreciate until I got there is, like, yes, it's summer hockey, but it's a pretty good level of competition. The guys are trying different things. They're actually trying, like, it's probably a step above an all-star game pace, but that's, obviously not a high bar to clear. But at the same time, it's really fun because guys are trying different things. There are obviously a lot of younger guys that are, trying to prove themselves a little bit, or, challenge themselves a little bit. And we even had a fight last year, like Teddy Bluger and Vinny Lettieri, two established professional hockey players, dropped the gloves and fought into Beauty League. And I was like, well, it's good for business. So yeah, but that was it's a really cool thing. And yeah, and we've got a lot of stuff coming up, and certainly a lot more draft content, which is brand new this year. They've never had that until they hired me. So yeah, so it's been fun to do it.
Nice.
Were
Well, I
you at the
mean,
draft in Nashville?
I sure was. Yeah, I was there. And yeah, the NHL wasn't really familiar with what flow hockey was. So I did have to kind of convince them that I was a real person. But yeah, no, they knew who I was, and it was just like, oh yeah, sorry. So but we got our spot. But yeah, we did a lot of on-site coverage, and obviously, like the regular draft stuff that I would have done at any place else. Instant analysis of the first round, grades for the teams, and that's all up there. I mean, the other nice thing about the work that I do now, when I was at ESPN, it was still Insider and then the beginnings of ESPN Plus. So it was all behind the paywall. And then I went to Substack, it was all behind a paywall. Daily Faceoff, it wasn't, but now it's not at Flow either. So it's free to read, and certainly free to absolutely trash everything I write as well now. The paywall was good about keeping the trolls out for a little bit, but I'm happy to be back, kind of in the public realm and just putting that out there for everybody to see. And yeah, it was really cool to watch it grow this year and see people, find the coverage wherever it is.
I guess we'll jump right into just your thoughts on the whole draft as a whole. I mean, we've talked a lot, being a basement dwelling team this year,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of hope for the draft and stuff. And, the talk of the draft was Fantilli, Carlson, who's going to be the guy at 2. But before we get into any of that, who do you think were the big winners or losers of the draft?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of winners, I mean, it's hard not to have to have the Blackhawks be the big winner of the draft. I mean, you get the number one prospect in Connor Bedard, but then you also get Oliver Moore slipping to 19. So now you've got another center that has tremendous speed. So you get the best shooter in the draft, you get the best skater in the draft, and more. I like their second round strategy. They went and got a goalie early. Adam Guyon was, one or two in a lot of lists. For goaltending, he was second on mine. And I think that's an interesting one, and that was a pick I think they had to make to kind of trigger the run on goalies, because we knew it was going to come at some point. Obviously the Ducks got involved in that too with Damian Clara later in the second round. But we just saw a lot of teams start going after the goalies there, and so they did that, and then just building up on a prospect system they got other guys. Martin Misiak's a good player. They got Marcel, who's just this massive guy and has an amazing name to say. And they Yanni Peltonen was like their last pick of the draft. And I thought that was a guy that has a chance to play games at some point down the road. So I thought that their draft was really good. I mean, for the losers of the draft, I think it was anybody that didn't have a first round pick is probably feeling pretty empty handed coming out of this draft. There were a lot of teams that didn't pick until later, like the Islanders didn't pick till late in the second round. There the Bruins didn't have anything until the third round. Ottawa didn't have anything until like the fourth round. Toronto only had 3 picks, and then they went way off the board with their first round pick. And I think sometimes when you have a lighter amount of picks, you're going to focus in on guys that you're really passionate about. And so obviously they were passionate about Easton Cowan. I don't know a ton of other people that were. I think that he was a late riser, but that's your first pick, and then you only have 2 additional picks. Did you move your prospect system forward? I think that some of these teams that have kind of bet the farm and have lost some of the prospect capital that they had before, or draft capital or whatever else, it could come back to bite you later. But as we saw from Vegas, you can just give out draft picks or first round prospects like candy, and that's how you get better for some teams. I think they set a new standard for how to use the draft. It's not to have these guys long term, it's to get to the next level. And so that's an interesting thing too. And actually Vegas ended up having a great first round pick too. David Edstrom was the pick of the last pick of the first round, and I thought he was one of the better centers available. I had him as a top 25 pick. And yeah, so I mean, I think I think Chicago did very well. I think you have to feel good if you're the Ducks. You have to feel good if you're Buffalo. St. Louis had 3 first round draft picks. I think they reached a little bit on their second one, but not a ton, or their third one rather. So I think those teams that had multiple first rounders are feeling really good about themselves too, because they were able to really tap into a draft class that we've been talking about for so long as being a really good one.
Speaking of teams that had multiple first round picks, I'm curious about what you thought of the Coyotes draft. They took the 2 Russian kids at 6 and 12, Simashev and Daniil But. I kind of like it that they kind of went off the board like that for high upside. What were your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think anytime you go for upside and for ceiling, I think it's intriguing. You also have to do that knowing that you're also assuming a lot of risk. And I think one of the things that we're now starting to see, and this is more of a recent development that's happened after the draft, is the ability to get players out of KHL contracts apparently is about to become harder. So that's if they're signed to contracts. Now, if a player's contract expires, then they're fair game. The KHL contested that Ivan Fedotov, the Philadelphia Flyers goalie prospect who was detained and then forced into military service, is now out of that. He's fulfilled his obligation apparently magically in time for the training camp of the KHL. And they're saying he basically just signed a new contract in the KHL, even though he had a valid contract with Philadelphia. So that's a very complicated thing that now is new. But assuming that Simashev and But do not re-sign or sign extensions, then Arizona would potentially have the rights to sign them within the next 2 years. So that's okay. But to just go like their entire draft class, I think I said on my podcast, is 134 feet tall, which is yeah, I think the equivalent of the world's tallest thermometer in the Mojave Desert. So that I found that I looked that up. I have no life. But you look at what else they did, and all the guys that they picked, except for one, were 6'2" or taller. I think in Simashev, you've got potentially on talent, potentially the best defenseman in the draft. Like everybody knew that the risk was there, but the talent was also there. So the question is does he have enough offensive upside to be a top pairing defenseman? Whereas we think, David Reinbacher has more offensive upside than Dmitry Simashev does. But Simashev is bigger. He's good mobility. He's a better defender. There's a lot of things to like about him. Daniel Boots is a 6'5" forward with incredible skill, like great hands, great shooter. They got Michael Hrabal, who's a 6'7" goaltender, who I really liked. He was my number one goalie. Then they continue to make bets, getting Jonathan Castagna, who played in a Canadian prep school this past year, not a place where you're taking guys super early, but he was a 3rd-round pick. Noel Nord, a big guy from Sweden who can score. So like they clearly had a type. They were going to go big. And because they had so many picks, and they had 12 picks or whatever in this draft, because they had so many, they were able to take those swings. Because by the sheer, like, if none of those guys pan out, then this is going to go down as like the worst draft ever, because you had 12 guys, you just bet big on everybody and nobody panned out. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they have enough there that's going to be several guys that are going to be legitimate NHL players down the road. So I like what they did. I think they took some chances, but at the same time, there is a very real possibility that their best picks are, not helping them for a few years down the road, and maybe not helping them as much as some of the potential safer options. But I'm never going to fault a team for taking chances.
And I mean, at this point, there was a lot of talk of like, Matvei Michkov being options after top 3 or 4. There clearly seemed to be like a game, like you were kind of saying with Toronto not having a ton of picks. Like there clearly was a game plan with some of those teams.
Right.
And I mean, I'm gonna be upfront and say I don't really know much about prospects up until a week before the draft happens. It's just that part of my brain just can't compute sometimes. But it feels like there was a lot of that this year where there obviously were some guys like, we'll get into the Carlson Fantilli stuff in a sec here, but like, you had Columbus taking Fantilli and Brindley, back to back. And there are a lot of types that seem to fit a lot of teams in this draft. Would you say it's kind of an anomaly this year? Or is this kind of a trend that you see year to year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every team goes in with a game plan, and they set their own tiers, just like we might, and sometimes we set tiers, like for us that do this publicly. It's like, is this guy going to be a future NHL All-Star? Is he a Hall of Famer? Is he just another guy? I mean, whatever tier you put him in. But teams will actually, look at different archetypes of players. They will look at different kind of styles. Like they might go in with a game plan. Like their game plan might be, we are like Arizona, we're going to go big. And so all of these big guys are going to be higher on our board, and we're going to push the smaller players down. And if they're there, they're there. Some people say like the Carolina Hurricanes have a type. What they don't do is they don't deviate from their list. So they basically will take the best player available regardless of that. And in a lot of cases in the last couple of years, the next best player available was a smaller player with a lot of skill. They're a team that's going to focus more on skill than they are on the size, but that could eventually come back to hurt them, because they had a draft this year where they had several sub 6 foot skill players, and usually not more than 1 or 2 of those guys are going to pan out in a draft class. So, that's the other thing that you kind of got to look at as well. And I think there are just so many different things that happen. So it is kind of cyclical. I think this year, one of the things that was interesting about the class is that a lot of the best offensive performers were undersized. That Bedard, Michkov, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, like, and by undersized, I mean like below 6, like at 6 foot or shorter. Because but then there's Zach Benson, who's 5'9". There's Andrew Crystal, who's 5'9". Like all these guys that are coming in. Gavin Brindley was 5'8". He measured in at 5'8" at the combine. And that does matter. So I think that allowed some of the bigger players to go higher than we expected, necessarily them to go. I mean, I think of ultimately maybe not how higher than we expected them to go, but higher than we were ranking them to go, because I'm not as focused on size as an NHL team is going to be, but they kind of have to be. They kind of have to be aware of it, because there is, you look at NHL roster makeups around the league, and there is a difference between, the teams that you can have a Jonathan Marchessault like Vegas did and had him win the Conn Smythe, but then they also had him surrounded by absolute giants and killers on defense. And so, that's the other thing. And they also just proved that maybe you don't need to spend a ton on a goalie. Maybe you don't need to, the lessons that we learn in every playoff, I think sometimes can be a little bit, I think we get sucked into them a little too much. But it's a copycat league for a reason. And, teams are going to continue to follow those kind of traits and certainly big was a big theme of this draft.
Kind of leads into another question that I had. The Ducks had, getting to the Ducks now, the Ducks had 5 picks between obviously 2 and 65. And while we were kind of talking this podcast about selecting guys with high upside and like that produced well at the junior levels, we're obviously identifying the Gavin Brindleys and Andrew Crystals and whatnot, but then the Ducks select obviously Leo Carlsson, but then go and select Nico Majatovic and Carey Terrance and Colson Pitre. And I was just, those players fit a specific type, like you were saying. And I was just wondering if GMs draft for like translatable skill sets towards their specific system, if that makes sense.
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, I do think that they do that, but I think that the scouting staff also knows they might not be drafting for the coach that's there right now. And so you do to a certain extent, you say, okay, we want hard driving attacking players. We want guys that are going to be strong on the work ethic. You're also going to look at your prospect system and say, okay, well, we've got all the offensive defensemen we could ever want right now. How are we going to address that? And then they go and just focus a lot on forwards in the early part of the draft. And I'm sure that the way that they weighted their board, there were just a lot more forwards that were up higher than some of the defensemen here. And that's because who you have coming. So, I think in the end, like Nico Majatovic is a good example of a player that I think if the Ducks didn't take him there, he probably wasn't going to last more than a few more picks after that. He was a guy that I think a lot of teams really liked as a second round option for them. He has that combination of size and some heaviness to him. And then on top of it, he produced and played really well and played a substantial role on a team that had 7 first-round draft picks on it and towards the end of the season, and found a role and carved out his own identity on that role. Carey Terrance is a guy that has just this tremendous speed and obviously a work ethic and can play down your lineup late in the second round. That's the kind of guy that you're looking for. You're looking for some of those guys to say, hey, that's a player that we are pretty sure is going to find a role on our team. He doesn't have to be a top 6 forward to have success. You take a bigger swing on a Damian Clara because your system is going to need goaltending. All the best goalies were going to be gone. They were gone by the time you took Terrance and Clara. There was no Trey Augustine, there was no Michael Hrabal, there was no Carson Bjarnason. So now you start having to say, okay, we got to get Damian Clara in the mix. So that helps them too. And then Petra is another guy that has that kind of work ethic, that drive, good defensively, interesting. And then, but you follow that up with a Yegor Sidorov, and that's a guy that's like, oh, where did all of his offense come from this year? A guy that just kind of exploded, and you say, okay, can we tap into that? Rodwin Dionisio is another, a re-entry this year, and a guy that just has tremendous skill and is an absolute, that's, as a 5th round pick, you love the bet that is, because you saw the hands that he has, you saw that he can make some plays, and he's just not a very good defender, but there's something there. So you take that chance. So, I think that's the way teams are starting to look at different things. There are also teams, the Ducks obviously didn't do this. They had a very CHL heavy draft outside of, Leo Carlsson and Damian Clara. So a CHL heavy draft. A lot of teams are now focusing those later picks on players that they're going to be able to retain the rights for longer, because now the guys that you drafted in those later rounds, you have 2 years to make a decision on them. And so many guys, we saw this last year, the 2021 draft class just produced a lot of duds, that guys that didn't get contracts, and it didn't get redrafted either this year. Like there was second round. Ben Gaudreau was a second round draft pick goalie, not signed, not redrafted. So like that's what you're taking on a little bit more risk because you don't have as long as a timeline to take those players. So those are the other kinds of things that you're trying to decide. Some teams will look at players that are going the college route or draft more Europeans later because they have a longer time to sign them. So that's the other thing that kind of happens there. But I mean, clearly, I think the Ducks have been a very CHL focused group. I think that, Martin Madden obviously is going to be, looking at those leagues pretty darn closely and has had a lot of success drafting out of there. So you can't blame him for going back there. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to watch them, and certainly was interesting this year, kind of in this stage of their rebuild where, they feel like they've got a lot happening and a lot of good things going. And I think that this class just continues to build on that.
I had a
Yeah.
similar question. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna just say a comment about watching Cedarov the other day at camp. He is a real treat. I mean, he was flying out there. I mean, was he playing much defense? No, but again, we're watching a development camp where they're drilling the kids and they're just doing a fun scrimmage. But the fact that he tried a between the legs to a Forsberg move on a breakaway was just absolutely hilarious. But at the same time, just like how do you think of that in such a split second? But yeah,
Lots of skill. Yeah. Lots of skill and just being like a showman, I guess.
it was quite the, I mean, there were a lot of nice little plays like that. Jack and I were there, Patrick was there. But I think that was the moment where I was just like, holy shit, like this kid's got some balls.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to do it in a development camp where there's no jobs on the line.
Go ahead, Jack.
I just had a similar question to Patrick talking about the forward group that they drafted. A little comment you mentioned about the height. Like I think every player the Ducks drafted this year were 6 feet or over. But this forward group, we all knew that the prospect pool was lacking forward depth and it was really heavy on the blue line. How much did this draft help the depth on the forward side and the overall like prospect rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it helped a lot because now you have a potential number one center in Leo Carlsson, which is going to make a massive difference in the outlook of your team. And you figure that Mijatovic is going to play eventually. You figure Terrence is going to find a way eventually. Petra has a game that he can fit into a role. So you're starting to kind of, as you plot out kind of the future of this team. What it does though is also creates a lot of interesting questions. Like, is Trevor Zegras really a center? Because now you've got Leo Carlsson, you've got Nathan Gaucher, you've got Mason McTavish, and I don't know, and I love Trevor Zegras, but is he a center in that mix? And that becomes a question, is like, and how does that fit? How does that fit going forward? It's not a decision they're going to have to make next year. I mean, I think that Leo Carlsson could potentially make the team. I think it's probably beneficial to him to get another year of professional hockey in Sweden and become a more dominant player before coming into the NHL. I think there is such a thing as too early. And I think if there's any shred of a doubt, you send him back. And I think that's it's a fine decision to make. I don't think you would have had to do that with an Adam Fantilli. I think he was ready to make that step in. Probably wasn't going to be the number one center, but he was going to play quite a bit. But at the same time, he could have potentially even gone back to Michigan. It was something that he was entertaining, but obviously just signed with Columbus. So this class does give you a little bit more options. And it also, I think, has a shorter term. Like Leo Carlsson, it's probably 1 year, if that 1 year away. So now your timeline is starting to look a little different in terms of where everybody's going to go, how they're all going to fit when these contracts kick in, all those different things. So, I think having the foundation of guys like Terry and Zegras, and then, building around them and having guys like Gaucher and, and McTavish and some of these other guys, is who else is going to take a step up and step into the lineup. There's still a little bit of short-term pain ahead because, the Ducks, you look at up and down their roster and it's still not like there are good players. There's a ton of talent. There's a lot of guys coming, but you can't have a team full of 20 and 22-year-olds and expect to compete. So, we'll see exactly where it all goes. But I think this class in particular, I don't necessarily know that they were gonna go forward the whole way, but because of where they finished in the ranking or in the standings, and because of all the great forward talent that was available, I think they did very well in supplanting, some of these other guys that, you also know there are a lot of players right now where they're starting to get pushed out, like they might not make it. So now you have a new group to try and restart that clock.
We've talked a lot in the last 2 weeks since the draft about the patience that this fan base needs to have. And, you just touched on, it's probably going to be beneficial to have Leo Carlsson play another professional season before just rushing him into NHL play. But we've seen a lot so far with this fan base. And I think a lot of it still comes down to just that disappointment of it not being Fantilli at 2. But to the average person who may not actively know much about Leo Carlsson, what would you tell a person like that that's not familiar with his game to kind of ease them into making this pick a little bit easier?
Yeah, I mean, let me start by, saying I had Adam Fantilli ranked second. I thought he was a great fit. I think he's the better of the two players. I think he will be the better of the two players. That's just me. That said, here's why Leo Carlsson made sense for the Ducks. And if you want to judge the two players together, there's a couple things. I think, Fantilli's faster, more physical, and actually might even be a little bit more skilled. But Leo Carlsson is incredibly skilled, very intelligent, much a higher end hockey sense and a higher end understanding of how to produce offense against professionals than I think Adam Fantilli did. Where this decision, I think, ultimately came down is, was solidified at the Men's World Championship when Leo Carlsson was the basically the first line center for Sweden. They didn't have a ton of team success. They were out of the tournament a little bit early, but he had quite a bit of success playing alongside Lucas Raymond, and it showed that he could play with, high skill. He could be a dangerous player. He was, confident and capable. I think character-wise, it's a wash between the two players. I think they're both good kids. But Leo, certainly there's something about him that, obviously a lot of people gravitate towards him. I think he's very well liked. He's a guy that, has a quiet confidence about him, even though he may not always outwardly express that. The other thing too is I think the defensive elements of his game are pretty strong. And I think that was another factor here. The fact that he played wing most of this year, we didn't get a chance to really see that. And that's another reason why I think it would be great for him to go back to Sweden, to go back and be a center as a professional and be that because it's his natural position. I don't think it's going to be a problem for him to do it. I mean, Trevor Zegras was a left wing for most of his draft season, or a lot of his draft season. And especially, towards the end when he's playing with Jack Hughes and Cole Caulfield and whatever else. And I, so I think that Leo he showed at that Men's World Championship that he can play. The question is going to be, I think his pace is a little different. He's not as aggressive physically. Is he really a power center? Will he have that defensive capability at the NHL level? I think those are some of the valid concerns. But the thing is that his high-end hockey sense, his deliberate pace of the game, his ability to analyze everything as it's happening is really special. And so I can understand, like I said, you put me in that chair, it's a different decision for me, but it's not an insane decision to go with Leo Carlsson. There was plenty of debate about that. And I think that the Men's World Championship may have really solidified that for Leo being second on some boards internally, and obviously for the Ducks being the guy that they wanted to go with.
You mentioned Leo Carlsson's maybe superior hockey sense. You have a podcast. It's called Talking Hockey Sense.
Yeah.
Can you define hockey sense? And is it different from like IQ, or are they kind of the same thing? Is it just X's and O's? Is it sensing pressure or just anticipation? What would you define it as?
Yeah, I mean, I think hockey sense is a catch-all term. And it encompasses a lot of things, and it's really one of the reasons that the podcast is called Talking Hockey Sense, is because hockey sense is the trait that I value most highly in a player. That's so many different things, but so hockey sense, hockey IQ, pretty much interchangeable in terms of, like, it's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. It's an understanding of how to play. It's an understanding of, being able to read plays, being able to read and react very well, having the vision to make passes, anticipating where the puck's going, anticipating how a play is going to develop, reacting to whatever changes come your way as well, being able to process that quickly. I think the one thing you watch a Connor McDavid play, and I think, in addition to being one of the fastest skaters in the world, he has the fastest processing speed of any player I've ever seen. He can play at his pace because he thinks the game as fast as his feet are moving. And that's incredible. And it's something that makes him, that's why he's so different. In the case of Leo Carlsson, I think it just helps to kind of explain how it manifests itself in the way that he plays. So when you watch him play, he's not always moving very fast. He's not a guy like that. That's a big difference between him and Fantilli. Fantilli is a hard driving, attacking player. Leo Carlsson is a deliberate player. He reads plays exceptionally well. He's very good off the rush. He processes the game faster than he can move, which is helpful. And then he also is, really good at passing, really good at knowing how to exploit defenses, finding the seams, finding the places where he can either pass the puck or skate into, a softer area. When to get a shot off, where to go to get that shot off. Time and space in the offensive zone is one of those things that you'll know it when you see it. Like, you can watch Trevor Zegras pop into a little area that nobody's there. Nobody was there. Nobody thought he would go there, but he knew that's where he needed to be, and that's where the puck was going to go. And you see that with him. You see that with, goal scorers like Alex DeBrincat was just traded today, so he's in my mind. He's one of the best at getting lost in the offensive zone and then popping out right when the puck's ready to be there and it being in a dangerous area. That's what makes him a 40-plus goal scorer in the NHL. So, that's the kind of thing. With Leo, I think it's going to be just, being really good on the power play, being good on at even strength, being able to play defensively, being able to transition well. All of those things he can do. And, I think that the way that he thinks the game is really special. I think in this draft, the player with the best hockey sense of anybody, I thought, was Michkov. But, I also put, in that category, Bedard, Will Smith, Gabe Perreault, Leo Carlsson, like, those guys are all in the upper tier in terms of the hockey sense. And so, to me, if that is what you value most highly, and it can't be the only thing, because, I think, but I do think it's a really important thing. But if you value that most highly and you say, oh, well, he also has 6'3", great hands, great shot, really good passer, committed defensively, like, he checks a lot of boxes. And then that central box of hockey sense, is what, to me, is the only real separating factor between him and Adam Fantilli.
Like you were kind of saying, there was a noticeable kind of aura around him at the camp on Friday. A lot of people online were saying it looked like he was lethargic out there, like he was tired or he wasn't trying. And I just think that there was a lot, at least putting aside the fact that this was a development camp scrimmage that was just for fun to kind of get the fans there to check out, the kids in the system and stuff. I can kind of see that perspective of it looking like the guy's not trying, but on the same end, you have the Sidorovs of the world that are going out there and trying all these fancy moves, trying to show off. There was just kind of this air of just chaos of everything was up and down the ice, but every time he stepped on the ice, there was just kind of this, I wouldn't say calming feeling, but you can tell that it was very methodical. He's not trying to bust up the ice and blow past people. He is getting the puck and he's looking for outlet passes, or he's using his size to get past guys, but also set up everybody that's streaking behind him. And I think that's something that's been lost a lot in the last 2 weeks, just because a lot of Ducks fans were enamored with having a bulldog like player like Adam Fantilli. And we all were. We had a whole episode the night we got second overall, and it was kind of the fallout of that. We spent an hour on here just talking about like, oh, it's gonna be so great to have Adam Fantilli in a Ducks jersey, and this is gonna be so awesome. And I get that with people, but it's they're at the end of the day, there was a lot of talk of, especially with us, if this isn't a bad decision, regardless of who you take it to. And, to your point of saying that he definitely checks a lot of boxes that may not make sense to us as fans, but definitely makes sense to what the team's trying to build. And, adding, like we touched on, adding players that, are just absolute monsters out there. I mean, watching some of those kids skate on Friday, it's like these big guys can move.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm going with this is you have all of these guys, but we got to talk about the speedy little guy, Olen Zellweger. What are your thoughts on him? Because that kid is so much fun to watch.
He is. Yeah. I think, and just before I get into Zellweger, one thing about player development camps, I honestly think, and I have all the respect in the world for every NHL team. I think it's a great thing to do. It's a great way to introduce your organization to new players, to get them in there. I think that a lot of the on ice components are not very helpful for anything. It's July. Some of these guys came straight from the draft. I just saw that Braden Yeager had only brought his skates to the draft, and that's all he had. So when he went to Pittsburgh, he had to get completely outfitted in new gear. And, so like all these different things kind of happen. And, I would say, don't read into anything you saw in development camp. Like Leo Carlsson, I have no worries about his compete level, his the way that he plays. He's just calm. I mean, he's not rattled, and just makes, that he's calm. But yeah, and Chicago actually didn't do an on ice component this year, which is kind of amazing, because they probably could have like sold $50 tickets for everybody that wanted to see Connor Bedard for the first time. But they didn't do it. And I actually think that there's more benefit. We saw Ronnie Hirvonen from the Maple Leafs camp got absolutely blown to bits in a scrimmage game. It's like, why are you even scrimmaging? Like, what is the point? And and I don't like, it was a clean, like the hit was fine. Like I was like, you can't blame a free agent invite for blowing up a kid. I mean, that's what he's there to do. He's trying to earn a job. But anyway, that's my little rant on prospect camps, because I've been thinking about development camps, because I've been thinking about it. But prospect camp and prospect tournaments, that's actually guys trying to like fight for jobs and fight for, opportunities. That's a different story. But in July, it's just like, what are you gonna, just don't read into it, I'd say.
They're out there for exercise. And
yeah, like it's not even that. It's just like to say, welcome to the organization. We'll get you in a Ducks jersey. We'll get you in front of our coaches. We'll get you in front of our development guys. You'll start this relationship that's going to carry you through your prospect. There's value in it for that. But beyond that, like some of these scrimmages, and it just only stands to make a lot of, bad fodder for us to talk about. But anyway, but to get back to Zellweger, I mean, like, you look at his junior career and what he's done. It's sensational. I mean, you love the way that he plays, offensive sense off the charts. He's committed defensively, obviously not a big guy, but, just does a lot of things really well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how he fits in long-term with the Ducks, the way they've built their group. Obviously you have Jamie Drysdale, you have Mintyukov, you have other players that are going to be, important players for them, long-term. But that having those that puck moving element, it's gonna be really fascinating to watch kind of how they balance that decor out. with the guys that they do have that can really play offensively. But as far as Zellweger goes, the next steps and the next things that he has to prove is, he was a dominant WHL player. I don't think we learned anything new about him this year beyond the fact that he's still really good. He's played great internationally. He's done a lot of great things and in big ice time. That's expected. I think that the next step is probably AHL time for him. We'll see if he makes the Ducks, but I think AHL is going to be a really good opportunity for him to just get used to defending pro talent, to making plays. But I think that the sky is the limit for him because he is such an intelligent player and moves pucks so well and gets pucks to the net, skates well. He does, pretty much everything well. Getting a chance to play in a high profile kind of environment this year with the Memorial Cup and everything like that, that helps propel him. And playing the World Juniors, he's outstanding at the under 18 Worlds. He's all these steps, he's checked every box along the way. But I think going from the WHL directly into the NHL is a big leap, and especially for a player at his size, where there's still more physical development happening. There's still other things you have to learn. But in general, I mean, you look at the D-core that the Ducks have built over the last couple of years in the prospect system, and one of those guys or two of those guys, or even if all three or four hit, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we've got the modern NHL D-core that moves pucks exceptionally well, that defends with offense, like all this other stuff that you can do. So fascinating to see how it pans out. I really like the player a lot, though.
Just
talking
watching him skate on Friday was the one word I would say was mesmerizing.
Yeah.
Like out of all of I mean, granted, we've seen a lot of him over the last couple of years, since his draft year. But he makes it look too easy. It was making me tired watching in the stands, just because I would kill to have just a sliver of his talent.
Yeah, he is special, no question.
Yeah, he's a bowling ball on wheels, like on skates. I mean, he's a bowling ball
Yeah.
on skates. He's hard
Yeah.
to move off the puck. He's moving 100 miles an hour, and he's all in control. It's insane to watch. I had a question about kind of like the headliners of, or besides the headliners of this Ducks prospect pool, you got obviously Zellweger, who we just talked about, Carlson, Mintyukov. Outside of those three, who's like the prospect that you're most excited to see go through the rankings and get to the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, I think one of the guys that's going to help them balance out this D-core is going to be Drew Helleson. I think that he is going to be one of the players where you need somebody like him. He played on that great 2001 team with Zegras and Caulfield and Jack Hughes, and he was a reliable defenseman, a guy that played big minutes for them, and those guys were doing all the offensive stuff, and he was relied on more to do the defensive stuff and play physical. And so he's not as exciting of a player, but he is an important player. Because as I look now, and I am so when I worked at the National Team Development Program, Cam Fowler was one of the players that was there. I was there, and you look, and what a tremendous career he's had. I think a very underrated career. I think he's an outstanding player, and I will never ever say a bad word about Cam Fowler, because I think he's also a great person on top of that. But you look at the way this is built, and then they brought in Gudis. There's a lot of things that they're trying to find the balance here. But like Jackson Lacombe is another guy who kind of gets lost in the mix because it took him so long to actually sign. But I mean, just a really great passer, a guy that has made tremendous strides developmentally over the last couple of years at Minnesota. He was such a raw prospect coming out of Shattuck St. Mary's, and he struggled a little bit, even though he was putting up numbers. Like, he always put up numbers, but I didn't love him his freshman or sophomore year at Minnesota. Junior and senior year, you start seeing, wow, this guy's actually starting to really put it all together. And then I think he was outstanding this year. So those are guys that I think are going to be important. Like the guys that have a little bit more maturity, that have kind of been through this process for a bit longer. Helleson actually got some NHL games. So that's a guy, he'll play for your team. Like, he's not going to be a star, but he's going to play for your team, and he's going to help you. So those guys are pretty important, and I think I'm really fascinated to see the development of Damian Clara. Like he's a freak athlete, just got a tremendous, the size and the fact that he's Italian, it's like from actual Italy. I want to see what he does and how he develops, because he did have a good season this year, and he put himself on the map with a really strong season. I think that there were a lot of teams that were very intrigued by him, and while I personally didn't have him as a top 100 prospect, I was like, he wasn't far away off of that. And sure enough, there were a lot of teams that you talked to afterwards that are excited to follow him as well. So those are the kinds of guys that I think are going to be important to kind of follow, because they're, you're right. Like the headliners, like we've seen it. How many great prospects, the guys that you're so excited to see, and they're just kind of okay. That's going to happen now all the time, and especially like even though the Ducks have built one of the better prospect systems in the NHL currently, there's going to be a few duds in there. It's just the way it tends to work, like there's going to be a few guys that don't pan out quite the way that you want them to. But that's when you need guys like a Drew Hellison or like a Jackson Lacombe to kind of come in and stabilize things a little bit. And maybe they're not as top tier, maybe they're not top 4 guys. You never really know, but those are guys that I think will be important to this system.
Yeah, we saw Lacombe and Hellison play a couple games this year, and I mean they weren't like blowing us out of the water, but I mean they looked like they fit in. They didn't look like they were out of place. I mean they blended in pretty well. Could have been how bad the Ducks were, but I mean
that decor is still, you kind of look at it and you're like, that was an NHL decor this year. That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know if it was compared to what we already had, but I mean they looked fine.
To your point, yeah. I mean, I watched a little bit of it then too, and I think they look fine too. And actually, a lot of these college guys are coming in more prepared, and certainly when in Hellison's case where he had AHL time on top of that, that really does help. And so, I think that they're very well set up. And there's two guys that are obviously on the older end for prospects now at this point. So they should be more physically advanced. They should, so they're, yeah. And I think that a lot of those guys, they come in, they can at least fit in. And I think for the Ducks right now, they're kind of in stopgap mode. Like you now need to have the guys like the Radko Gudises of the world, like guys that are coming in kind of on those shorter term contracts to just kind of get you through. But you never know, maybe some of these guys really pop early and things turn around a little quicker than you expect.
Well, I know you had a question about Dionisio, Jack.
Oh yeah. So just from watching him play and watching highlights from him, I mean, it looks like a typo when you see defense as his position. And
Yeah.
there's been some, I mean, I haven't seen true speculation about it, but some people have talked about, well, like there's a chance he could play wing down the road. Do you think that's a possibility at all? Or do you think he's just going to be a defenseman all the way through?
Yeah. I mean, I think if they drafted him as a forward, like, I don't think he would have been drafted if he was a forward, honestly. He's so skilled and he can do a lot of things, and he's got good size, and he did actually play wing a little bit with Windsor this year. But I think the possibility of, saying, hey, can we work with him enough defensively to make this work? The thing is that he has such a gigantic uphill battle with all the guys that they already have that are similar, in terms of, like even Lacombe. Like Lacombe is a better player by a lot right now. So you say, okay, well, how's that going to work? I mean, and that's really going to be his challenge, is if he can find a way to defend well enough. And I'm sure that the Ducks, now that they've drafted him, they're going to have a little say. They're going to be able to talk to, to wherever, if he's going to play for Windsor again next year, and say, we want him on the blue line. And usually the junior team's like, okay, unless it's a disaster and they can't, but he is not a good defender. And that is going to be his challenge to get better at. And it's why, he wasn't drafted before, despite a decent season in Niagara. That was a bad team, and sometimes you give those guys a break, but now having been with Windsor and having been on a contending team and produced at the level that he did, you can't really ignore that. So I think that he's got a lot of development time ahead of him. He's the kind of guy that I think will earn a contract because you're just kind of fascinated with the upside and the ceiling there. I thought that was just a tremendous bet to make, just to say, you can do a lot of cool things. Let's see if we can rein it in just a little bit and not lose who you are as a player. And now we'll have to wait and see if they can do it.
Yeah, I love a lot of the plays that he makes, and he does make a lot of those plays because he is able to scan the entire ice as a defenseman. So I love, it's been very intriguing to watch his progression in the next, year at least, or a couple of years. Before we let you go, I know we have a ton of more questions, but one thing specifically, you're very in tune with the program, the NTDP program. And you tweeted recently that Carey Terrance had been added to the U.S. World Junior Camp roster, and that the World Junior Summer Showcase is going to be taking place later this month. For those like myself, not familiar with that event, is it something we should be keeping an eye out for? What is it exactly, and where does Terrance fit on that team and in that program?
Yeah, so the World Junior Summer Showcase is basically an extension of the World Junior Camp. So for the World Junior Championship, they just added him. They didn't replace anybody. They just added him. I don't know why he wasn't on the original list, but he is now. And I think part of that is because he kind of fits a need that where they need some guys down the roster. Now, what I will say is that the forward group this year is absolutely stacked. They could have as many as like 12 or I think 12 or 13 first round draft picks that are on their roster this year, which would be massively, and that's including guys that haven't been drafted in the first round yet, like guys like Cole Iserman, who's draft eligible this year, James Higgins, who's draft eligible in 2025. They're all in camp, but basically, he's one of 45 players, I believe, that are in camp, and they've got to get that roster down to 25. They will play teams against from Finland and Sweden, and the Swedish roster is actually like loaded. They're bringing like Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Noah Ostlund, Liam Ogren, not Leo Carlson, sadly. He wasn't on the roster, but he'll be on the team. He was on the team last year. They don't need to see him in this camp.
He needs a break.
Yeah, and he played in the World Championship. Like, you're on the team, dude. So assuming you're not in the NHL. And so, it's a great competition. Being part of that group is really important. Like, I think that there's a stronger likelihood that Carey is going to be on the 2025 World Junior team as opposed to the 2024 World Junior team. Just because this team's going to have Logan Cooley, Cutter Gauthier, Will Smith, Gabe Perreault, Ryan Leonard, Charlie Stramel. Like, it's going to be a loaded roster, and it'd be really hard for him to make it. But the reason that he has a chance is because he's got a great work ethic, incredible skater, that speed factor that he brings to the table. You could put him in a 14 or fourth line role, and then you get a little extra scoring pop and a guy that's going to, forecheck really well. But, it's going to be hard to get more guys like him, because they're going to probably have Gavin Brindley, who was on the team last year, a couple other guys. They've got a lot of returning players, so it makes it difficult. I'll be at that camp, so I'll be going there. It's at the end of July. It goes into the first week of August there, and it's basically like, that and the Hlinka Gretzky Cup are kind of the two events that kick off the 2024 draft season. And so since I'm doing a lot of World Junior coverage this year, I'll be at that camp. So yeah, it's a great honor for him and a great opportunity. And I was glad to see him added. I thought he deserved to be there, and we'll see where it goes.
Cool. Unless you guys have any other questions, we don't want to take up too much of your Sunday night here, Chris, but
I'm just probably going to go to bed after this anyway. So whatever you got.
Yeah, if you guys have one more, if not, I'll
go. So looking ahead to the 23-24 NHL season, we're going to have this incredible influx of rookies. Obviously Bedard in Chicago and Fantilli in Columbus, but you're also going to have guys like Matthew Knies in Toronto or Shane Wright in Seattle. Who are you really looking forward to keeping an eye on and making their not debuts, but in their rookie years? And if you have a Calder pick, let me hear it.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, like it'll be interesting. Like, I think the Chicago has actually done the right things to kind of insulate Bedard, getting Taylor Hall, getting Corey Perry, even like, having guys that are veteran players to be around him is going to be important. I think that because of the immense offensive talent that he has, but because he's one of the best goal scoring talents there is, that we've seen, I think that there's a strong likelihood that Connor Bedard is going to be that rare guy that, goes number one and then wins the Calder. I think Connor McDavid would have done it if he didn't get injured in his rookie year. And so, but I think Bedard, is going to be substantial in terms of his talent and what he brings to the table, and the fact that Chicago isn't going to put him on an island to start the season. They're still going to be bad, but they're not going to be, completely inept. And that's going to be key for them. I think beyond that, certainly, Nyes is going to get a lot of attention in Toronto. He had a really good playoff. I think Brock Faber at Minnesota is going to play massive minutes for them next year.
Yeah.
And he was so good in the playoffs, and honestly, like one of the best pure defenders and some of the best defensive hockey sense of young players coming into the league. So I think that's going to be a pretty significant opportunity for them and for him. And so, yeah, so, I mean, I think that it'll also be a pretty intriguing rookie, like Calder race the year after as well, because we're going to have some of these guys that spent the extra year or two in college or in junior, or wherever they may be. So there's going to be I think we're going to just every single year, the rookies just get more exciting. Like, I think this year was actually kind of a down year for rookies, even though it was really good, because Matty Beniers was awesome. Jake Sanderson was awesome. Stuart Skinner was some of the goalies were really, really good. But next year, you're exactly right. I think the rookies are going to be there, but I think it's going to be really difficult for Bedard. There's obviously the hype. I think Nyes could really give him a good challenge. We'll see if the goal scoring is there. We'll see if he, I'm never sure if like Sheldon Keefe's going to throw him in the doghouse, or, what's going to happen about with him. But I really think that, those are the types of guys that are going to make an impact. And certainly Fantilli is going to get a lot of run at Columbus this year. And I think he'll have a strong season. I just don't know if he'll have a better season than I think Bedard will have for Chicago.
Then I'll make mine quick. Where would you rank the Ducks prospect system as it is right now after this draft?
Yeah, so I haven't sat down to really flush that out yet, because I think it does change a lot. This draft class changes a lot. Like, Chicago is completely altered, with Bedard, and suddenly is now towards the top. I think Anaheim is clearly a top 10 system. Like, I don't think there's any doubt about that. You do have the graduations to consider. McTavish is no longer a prospect per se as we define it. But obviously still very young. I think if you look at the U23 cores around the league, you're going to see a lot of people putting the Ducks pretty darn high up there because of the D, because of the various guys. I mean, the thing that's missing now, is what they have in their system. Do they have a goalie of the future? Do we know that definitively? Are we positive that they have that? That's never easy to determine. That's probably the one thing where it's just like, maybe, like I love Lucas Dostal. Like, I've been such a huge fan of his for a while. But then you look at Carey Terrance, you look at some of the other guys that they've brought in, or not Carey Terrance, Damian Clara. Got Carey Terrance on the brain after that last question. But you say, okay, well, can they do it? Is Callie Klang going to do it? I think that's really the only place where they're lacking, because you look across their team and you see all the guys that they've signed and that have a real opportunity to do something special here. So it'll be interesting to kind of see, but I think the Ducks are in such good position. Obviously it's taken a lot of pain to get there, but I think that the McTavish pick has only looked better in hindsight. I think that I think Mintyukov was just a really inspired pick. And now you look at what he did this year, you say, wow, this is incredible. And then that you have, Jamie Drysdale, you have Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry's older, but Troy Terry, like you've got you've got a foundation of players that you can continue to build around. With, they'll probably need some more of those veteran stopgap guys, probably in net, probably in other places too, where they're going to be able to kind of usher this new group in, because I don't think you can just bring them all in at the same time. And that's also, you don't want to do that for contract reasons too, but I think that they're going to find ways to kind of usher this group in. And but yeah, I mean, you have the 3 guys that were the respective defensemen of the year in their leagues. You've got now a potential number 1 center in Leo Carlson. You've got some guys that you're kind of waiting on a little bit still. Is Perreault going to do it? Are there some of these other guys that are going to find a way? But yeah, I mean, I think that in general, this is a team that's has a foundation and a vision for the future, which is a good thing to have. So we'll see where they're at. We'll see what happens, but I think ultimately, this is a team that is really well set up for it's been a rebuild already, but I think that we're starting to turn the corner on that, that downside and starting to move back up again.
Well, awesome. This was great, Chris. We really appreciate you hopping on with us. Before we let you go, outside of finding your stuff over with Flow Sports, if you'd like to plug anything else, we know you have your podcast. Where can the listeners at home find you?
So on Flow Sports and all our hockey content is on flowhockey.tv. That's the place to find it. And that's also Talking Hockey Sense is on there. It's on YouTube and everything else. Still on Twitter for now, I guess, at Chris M. Peters, at Chris M. Peters 10 on Threads. Are we doing that? Is there people doing that now?
Yeah, we got the threads kicked up for us too.
I guess we're doing that. At Chris M. Peters 10, because apparently when I made my Instagram account, there were 9 other Chris's. But but anyway, yeah. So that's the main spots, and certainly I'm always talking hockey pretty much anywhere and with anybody, and it's been great to be with you guys. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we hope you have a great rest of your night. We know it's a little later out there, so enjoy the rest. We'll maybe check back in next off season after another fun year of drafting.
Yes, it sounds good. Now I'm gonna just go ahead and engage vacation mode real shortly here.
Yes.
So one more day of work and then getting out of here for a little bit. So yeah, but it's great to spend some time with you guys. Really appreciate it.
Well, you have a good night, Chris. Thank you.
All right, thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Chris.
I love that he had the Mighty Ducks jersey too, sitting there.
I did want to ask if it was intentional, but
Yeah,
Of course it was. He's a smart
Yeah,
guy.
it
He's
had
clearly a
to.
smart guy.
yeah, it had to.
Damn, that was fun. He's
was.
just so smart, and he knew so much about every topic. That was awesome.
Well, we are gonna wait until Lou hops in to talk about the rest of what we had planned for this episode, which wasn't a ton, but speak of the devil, here he is.
Hello.
Hello?
There he is.
Hello?
Oh, there's our
Lou's
Lou.
live from the locker room.
Did you have a good night at work, Lou?
It was something.
It was work.
Yeah. I didn't really do much. I was watching you guys pretty much.
Hey, I mean, you're getting paid to do it, so.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into talking about all the signings, you guys want to talk a little bit about the fun time on Friday? Because I had a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking
good.
forward to hearing.
Besides the social anxiety of being around a lot of people, it was a lot of fun.
I love what we just talked about with Chris too. Chris Peters. He was just like, don't buy into it. It's just a camp for the players to meet the coaches and the GM and, just all that kind of stuff, and to not buy into anything going on the ice. So that was nice to hear. And it's good to just like kind of suffocate that fire, because it's just been so annoying.
It's been very annoying. Not gonna lie. you know,
Yeah, it's mostly just a showcase. It's like an introduction of like the coaching staff gets a feel for, okay, so these are what these guys look like on up close and personal. Now I have an
Yeah.
idea of, how to work with them over the off season and leading into training camp and prospect camps and all that.
And I appreciate that the Ducks did the 3-on-3 because it was cool to see, the team's new players on the ice. But it was clearly just a skills competition. You had, Sidorov cherry picking at the far blue line when the plays, at his own goal line. So I don't understand how people are taking anything from that. If there is something to take from the camp, I would take the like one-on-one battle drills, because that's kind of stuff that actually happens in hockey games. But even then, it's like with a humongous grain of salt.
Yeah, and you get a little bit of sense of, the players' creativity. You just kind of see where their mind goes, because obviously it's a more relaxed, loose environment, and they kind of have the more freedom to kind of do whatever they want and kind of show what they have.
I mean,
to see their potential.
Connor Smith took a slap shot in the shootout. Like,
That was awesome.
yeah, I don't think they went into the locker room and they're like, man, you really didn't try out there. What were you doing? Like, I mean, you could tell McIlvain was smiling. I mean, it was hard to know what was going on behind us because Greg Cronin and Ryan Getzloff were standing behind Jack and I. But you could tell that these guys had been worked all week. It's the end of this camp just to get familiar with, your fellow teammate, your fellow prospects. We thought everyone was in tow. Like, we saw Verbeek standing on the Bob Murray perch. We thought Henry Samueli was up there with them, but I think it might have been Martin Madden.
Is
Ryan
Pat still
Getzloff
holding
was
that
there.
stick?
He was not holding the stick.
He was wearing a nice white sweater though.
He was looking comfy.
Every picture I've seen, he was holding a stick like the entire week.
Hey, maybe he yearns to get back on the ice. We don't know.
What position did he play? Was he going to go forward?
It was a winger.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was a
winger.
winger.
Well, he could maybe contribute on the fourth line.
Yeah, he'd probably be better than any of our bottom six last year.
Yeah.
But I had a fun time. It was cool seeing that there, for a lot of talk of, I don't know if I can support this team after that year, and the heartbreak of not drafting Bedard and then getting stuck with Leo Carlson. I'm gonna shred my season tickets at home. Clearly was a lot of excitement to watch Ducks hockey again. Which,
I've never seen so many people get upset over a developmental camp 3-on-3 scrimmage.
but yeah, just another stopgap on the road to
Who stood out
season
to you
starting.
guys?
Nesterenko, I thought.
Nesterenko
Yeah,
was
he
really
was-
good.
Nesterenko was going to be my first choice too.
Yeah.
He just
From a point of just being fun, Sidorov was fun to watch, but he also was just trying a bunch of goofy stuff, and
yeah,
he was just a ball of energy.
the creativity and the skill is there. It's just being mature about it and picking his spots when to do it. But again, it's 3-on-3 training camp. He's going to do weird stuff, and it's all right because it doesn't matter. But it's nice to know that he has some tricks up his sleeve and he has skill.
Isn't afraid to show it.
We don't have a lot of skill at the moment.
I liked Callie Klang too. I thought he was very positionally sound, and he was, making some athletic saves as well. And I'm going to be excited to see him in San Diego this year. So
I also like Ian Moore. Like, he didn't do anything, spectacular or flashy, but I mean, just watching him, he just did everything right. He didn't do nothing special. It's just, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to do my job and call it a day.
yeah, I wanted to
Colangelo
ask.
looked really good. Colangelo really impressed, but he was on the ice a lot of the time with Zellweger, and just the two of them were just running amok.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Chris Peters about Ian Moore and Sam Colangelo, just because they're going into their senior years. And are we going to run into another Henry Thrun situation where we're going to have to trade their rights, or are we going to have like Jackson Lacombe and have them, finish their year in San Diego? So like, do I get invested in these guys going forward?
Yeah, I know. It got to like 8:40 and I was like, dang, we still have a lot of questions to go.
Yeah.
I do appreciate though that he was very thorough, because there was a couple questions I asked where it was just very like, oh, so what about this guy?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
very straight and to the point, but he was very insightful about that. And having someone that can put that so detailed, is definitely a step up from what I can do. And it's nice. It's nice having that positive outlook, because there's been a lot of negativity in the last 2 weeks, and
Mhm.
it's nice just hearing that.
Yep.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah.
Do you have fun watching on Twitch, Lou?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Do we sound good?
Yeah, great time.
Well, we do have some signings to talk about. Chris had mentioned it. In terms of talking about defense, we signed Radko Gudas to a 3-year by $4 million contract, which I don't hate. Might be a little bad the last year, but you have to insulate some of those young guys coming up, and why not get the guy with the best beard in the NHL?
Yeah, I like the pick from that aspect as well. I think his game is such so it's going to age pretty gracefully. Like I don't foresee a huge drop in what he can do. He's a very meat and potatoes kind of player. So I don't
Stay at
think
home.
yeah, he's a stay-at-home guy. He just doesn't make mistakes. Everything is tape to tape, and if he runs out of options, it's off the glass. Like everything is safe. And then obviously he's physical in front of the net and in corners and stuff. So he's what the D-corps needs.
I
think
don't
he's a
hate it
good-
too from the perspective of he had a good playoffs. It's not going to be too bad. We got the money to spend. Just let it ride.
Yeah, and even so, like 4 million a year in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, the last year it's gonna be more challenging, but I like the signing. He balances out the blue line, because there's just so many times where you're watching the game and it's like there's just the front of the net's just swarmed with the other team. Like nobody's clearing the front of the net, and he'll take that job, and he'll obviously, he's good at just being a body and knocking guys off the puck. And like Patrick was saying, he's safe, so not a lot of mistakes, which is always great, especially when you have the worst defense of maybe ever.
But also just a perfect partner for the young blue liners we have coming up. Maybe he'll be Lacombe's partner this year, maybe next year Zellweger's and Minchukov, so on and so forth. I just think he's a solid presence back there for those young guys.
Yeah, a lot of experience.
It'll be nice, like you said, Jack, to not have to see like Jamie Drysdale being the one guy trying to push like a Pat Maroon out of the crease. And it's nice having someone that can insulate some of those smaller guys that are still kind of coming into their own, because he's been there. He knows what he's doing. You're not going to have to worry about relying on the kids. And, that was a lot of the conversation with Chris is you're not realistically going to be a good team if you're having to field a rookie filled lineup like that. And it's not going to be realistic to do that in the coming years, until some of these guys take steps. So yeah, the money might not be favorable to us in a year or two, but it's a stopgap, a little more so than our other signing. Alex Killorn obviously was kind of the big signing that kind of got people in a tizzy. And I understand, 4 years, almost 6.5 million's a steep price for a free agent, but
Yeah, that last year is gonna probably not be good.
But Pat coming out and saying that he values this veteran leadership to add to the core of leaders in the room, like your Cam Fowlers, your Henriques, I'd say even Troy Terry to an extent. Like it's just another guy who he's done a lot of winning recently. And yeah, he's not going to go out there and be a first line player by any means. Maybe if this was a Dallas Aikens team still, he'd be playing first line minutes. But he's a guy that could potentially get you another 20 goals this year, is going to be a secondary scoring option, and is going to provide that mindset to kind of guide the kids along, which is kind of the goal at this point.
Come from a winning environment.
And he's a Verbeek guy too, so
Yeah.
that helps.
He's played more playoff games than I think it was 7 guys on our roster that weren't rookies, like have career games combined, like not combined, career games on our roster from this past year. So this goes to show how he's been there, he's done that, he's won 2 cups, he's multiple playoff runs, and he's insanely durable too. I think he's only missed like what, I'm not counting the COVID shortened seasons, but I want to say it was like he's missed 2 games in his entire NHL career, in the regular season at least. So I need to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what I remember.
You don't have to fact check. We're just the throw information and hope
yeah.
people don't fact check.
It's close enough. It's close enough.
But yeah, the term is long and the AAV is high, but it's kind of the price the Ducks have to pay right now because they're in a high tax state and they're at the bottom of the standings, and you have to get better at some point. And bringing in guys like that is how we're gonna slowly climb out of the gutter.
Yep.
And it seems like from all accounts he's like one of the best people to do it. I mean, just on the ice, he's doing dirty work and getting to, like, he's really good in small areas too. Excuse me. And in front of the net especially, he's good on the forecheck. It's little things that that the Ducks don't have on their roster right now that he's just going to fill in those holes.
And when you look at his salary, it's really not that far off from, I think it was Involving Hockey's projection. I think they had him at 6'1" AAV. So it's really not that far off from what he was expected to get. It's just, he's going to be 34 in September. So how is he going to play 34, 35, 36, and 37 while making 6.25 a year? It's steep, but I mean, like Pat said, you got to pay, and you got to pay to win. You got to overpay to get your guys sometimes, and I think this is just one of those cases. And his money comes off the books the same year as
John Gibson. Yeah.
Just
in case if he's still here, which who knows.
We'll get to that later.
And yeah, but Jakob Silverberg and who else comes off the books this?
Yeah, Silverberg and Henry comes off this year.
So it's a bad deal, but it's not going to be prohibitive in any way.
It's not great, but it could be way worse. Like,
a lot worse. It could have been 7.
People are making it out to be like this is going to hamper the Ducks, future, the cap space, hell, this and that. And it's like it's going to be an inconvenience, but
the last year is going to be rough, I think, but
probably.
But
and
also,
if needed, we can buy him out, and in case of emergency. Sorry, Pat.
No, it's fine. But like Jack, you were saying, he's obviously like a durable player. There's no like big injury history. Like Gudas, I don't think his game is gonna like just drop off a cliff. It's not a speed game. So I think it's just very translatable toward the next 4 years. I don't foresee a huge dip in his ability to do what he does now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be more of a steady decline than a massive drop off, kind of like we saw with Corey Perry. But I mean, he had knee problems, so there's that.
Was it just me, or does this scream temporary captain?
It's just you.
Is this the Steve that'd be Steve Ruchin? That's more Steve Ruchin.
Yeah.
Steve Ruchin stopgap. Until we give it to someone.
Once Adam Henrique is gone, he'll get the A, definitely, I think.
I don't know. Part of me saw this as, it's a Pat Verbeek guy from the Tampa days. this just screams, I don't know if I want to give it to a kid, one of the up and comers just yet.
I
I
I,
don't wa-
I don't know.
I
know
don't want
about
it to
that.
be that way, and I don't foresee that going that way because we've talked
Yeah,
a
I don't
lot
think it's gonna be
about
that. I think that's just you.
we've talked a lot about, the possibility of it more than likely being Cam Fowler or Troy Terry or, whomever. But the term just was like, he's going to be, 37, 38 by the end of it. Maybe shorter if there's ever a trade, a buyout, whatever. But it just screamed like, oh, he knows this guy already. Maybe he's just like, you know what? I want you to lead this locker room now. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking into things too much just to keep myself entertained. Could just be me. And our other signing that really wasn't of note was Robert Haig, 1 year, 775,000, seventh defenseman if things go awry with some of the kids or there's injuries.
Was he on Buffalo and Philadelphia?
Yes.
He played Philly for
I know
sure.
Buffalo. I think it was Buffalo.
I remember him being in Philly, I think. That just sounds like a guy they would have. I don't know.
But depth defensemen aren't a bad thing to have, and he's certainly a hockey player.
Yeah, 5 years in Philly, a year in Buffalo, Florida, and Detroit.
Been around a while.
I think
Journeyman.
it that
This
that
signing,
it decreases the odds of one of the kids, the left-handed kids, Minchukov or Zellweger, starting at least in the NHL. I think they're more destined for the AHL, and this kind of solidifies it, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
if this signing happened last offseason, Dallas Eakins would be licking his chops at another seventh defenseman for 11-7.
He'd be playing him top four.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we can't beat around the bush anymore. We got to talk about the spicy drama to close out all the Duck stuff. So if you've somehow been living under a rock, we were all graced by the now infamous clip of Frank Saravalli talking about John Gibson playing his, or expressly saying he had played his last games as an Anaheim Duck. And a lot of us came to terms on Twitter of, okay, if this is the case, it's time to cut the cord and just have this be done. But later in the afternoon, an interesting little wrinkle pops up of John Gibson's agent downright denying it and saying that Gibson has never said that and that he is still honored to be a Duck. And it has caused a whirlwind of emotions, especially after his appearance on Cam and Strick, where he said that, basically him and Pat have a general understanding of it is still time to move on. They are trying to find him a better situation, but given the parameters of his contract, money, length, it's very hard to move all of that money. But man, that was a interesting 48 hours, and probably the most limelight we've had in a while that wasn't losing the draft or being the worst historical team ever.
As Limp Bizkit once said, it's all about the he said, she said bullshit. And I mean, this is what, year 3 now of, oh, Gibson wants out, and then Gibson saying, no, I don't. And then, oh, Gibson wants out. Well, I do, but I don't, and it's exhausting.
Now it's yeah, I
It's
do want
exhausting.
out, but I at least talk to the team. I'm not like,
Well, I'm sure Gibson's like, look, I'd like to go to a winner, but if you can't make it happen, I guess I'll be here. Like, that's what it feels like, at least.
yeah. I mean, I definitely would agree with that. It's just like you said, we're kind of at that point where it's like it's just another year of, Oh, he wants out again. Okay, cool. But this time it just sounds a little more threatening and bad just because it's a very, very easy and very, appealing way to say, oh, I've played my last game. And
Do you
it
think he
not
really said it?
no.
I think he said it, but not
I
to
think- I
management.
think-
He said it to like
Yes.
his friends or
I
something.
think he
Yes,
said it
I think
when
that
he was
too.
like frustrated, but then he was like, he realized, oh shit, this is gonna make me look bad, and I need to backtrack a little bit. You know what I mean?
He's obviously an emotional
Right.
guy too.
Yeah.
Yes. Like I could definitely see him few beers deep on the golf course with his buddies. Like, yeah, I'm done. I'm never I'm never playing another game for that franchise ever again. And then someone's like, hey, look what John Gibson just said.
Yeah. Also, when Frank went on that podcast, that was the first time we actually heard the term requested a trade. From up to that point, it had been like Gibson wants out, or the Ducks would like to move him, stuff like that. That was the first time we heard trade request. But what kind of irked me was the second comment of I'll never play, or I'm done playing for the Anaheim Ducks, or whatever it was, just because his value is already at the lowest it's ever been, and that tanked whatever value he had left because it took away any leverage that the Ducks had. So I was like, awesome. And then so we're gonna trade him for peanuts, and then he's gonna be awesome somewhere else, and it's gonna suck, and we're gonna have to watch it for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just
So now they have some leverage back, I guess.
yeah, he restored, or they restored some goodwill and some good faith, but
Yeah, but you also got to think, like, do other teams around the league look at that? Like, okay, they've been going at it for like 3 years now of, oh, Gibson wants out. No, he doesn't. No, he wants out. No, he doesn't. Is he like, do we want that in our locker room? Like, if we trade for him and things don't pan out, like, is he going to be a problem? Are we gonna have to deal with this? I don't know if they're really going to consider that, but I mean, might.
you'll get a team that's desperate enough to look past
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
yeah.
There's going to be an
Yeah.
injury, or there's going to be some team who thought their goalies were going to be good and ended up being terrible, like the Kings last year. And then some team's going to need a goalie for sure.
And the
I
Kings still need a goalie.
I don't see
sorry,
him
the Kings
wanting.
always.
I don't see him being happy in Pittsburgh because their trajectory is going down. You know what I mean? They don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
much time left, and they're going to be in the same position as the Ducks pretty soon. So I don't see him being happy in Pittsburgh.
The
He's
Devils
just
still
grumpy.
make
He's
the
never
most.
happy anywhere.
The
Sorry.
Devils
Yeah.
make the most sense still. I
Is-
mean, I don't think they would ever trade him to a divisional rival. So I wouldn't see.
Yeah,
the Kings as-
optics wise, I don't think they'd ever do it.
I mean, when's the last time we made a deal with the Kings? Off the top of my head, George Peros.
I
Wait,
looked
was that a
back
trade
at
or
it.
was that a? Ooh,
I looked back at it I think 2 weekends ago, because I was talking to one of my coworkers who's a Kings fan. I think the last one was, I don't remember. It might have been the Sean O'Donnell trade.
Stanley Cup winner.
I think that's what
Stanley Cup.
I think that's what I
Oh.
came upon. Because like you go on NHL.com and it shows you like every trade every franchise has ever made. And I think that was the one. I think that was the first one. It was like 2008.
And this is a big trade if they were to
Yeah.
ever do it. And I don't see them ever doing it, honestly.
side
And I
note,
don't think the
George
Kings
Peros
can
was-
even do it. They don't have the money to do it.
Yeah, because aren't they only like a couple million or a few million out of the cap space or cap
Yeah.
limit? Yeah.
They would have to do a lot of work to get out of that.
They might be over right now.
Yeah, because they just signed PLD to that contract.
I thought I saw like they're 3 million shy. By the way, the Peros trade was Colorado, not Kings. He just played for the Kings the year before.
But I think
Uh,
I like the strategy now of just, I'm glad that Gibson has said he's going to be patient. We're going to be patient and just like let the opportunities come to
Yeah.
the Ducks, because then maybe he can start the season off playing well. And then if an opportunity opens up, then great. And, we'll maximize his value, and then he'll go to a team that he wants to go to. So it's kind of like a win-win. it's kind of encouraging where we're at right now with that situation.
All things considered.
Mm-hmm. Best of a
And-
bad situation.
And the Kings are 750,000 over the cap. So
Yeah.
they're gonna have to move something.
Well, one of their goalies is destined for the AHL, so
Who are their
probably
goalies
it.
right now?
Dave
It's
Riddick, Phoenix
Talbot.
Copley, and Talbot. Woof.
Ouch.
Who has the worst goalie situation, them or us?
Them.
Yeah,
Them.
definitely them.
We
Yeah.
just have a
Dostal.
bad defensive situation.
Yeah, yeah.
Ours isn't a goalie thing. Can you imagine
That's
our
true.
goalies with like Carolina's defense? Or
Oh my
something
god.
like that.
they we would
Just
be
the middle of the
incredible.
road defense.
Yeah, middle of the road defense. Anything.
I mean, all in all, I kind of feel like that attention is unwanted. You know, I tweeted about Pat obviously has kind of come to the conclusion that there's a culture he wants to push. The McIlvain hire, the Cronin hire, their comments at the draft about drafting kids with emotional maturity, guys that are going to fit the mold of being good professionals on top of being good hockey players. I was reading that quote. It hurts because, Gibson's always been one of my favorite players, and not just because I'm also a goalie. I just have really always enjoyed him. I was a big defender back in the day of it was the right decision to move on from Freddie Anderson and keep John Gibson, which, certainly to this day, I would say is still true. It was the
Mhm.
right choice.
Yeah.
I don't know. It hurt because it's like seeing a player like that you've grown so attached to and seeing that out there. It's just like, what the fuck, man? Like how could things possibly get more just toxic and just fucking crazy in one off, the first couple of weeks of the off season. But the retread and the backtracking of, and we don't even know if it's backtracking because who knows what was actually said.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't blame him for if he really did say that. I don't blame him, honestly.
Yeah,
Neither
and
do I.
he has he has valid reasons to be upset.
I mean-
Clearly he's not getting any younger, and you want to be in a situation to win because at the end of the
Didn't he
day,
face the most shots ever last year, or like one of the highest totals?
yeah.
Yeah.
But seeing like to kind of wrap it all up, like I still feel like you got to pull it sooner rather than later. You got to just rip the Band-Aid off and just do it. Obviously the right trade's going to have to present itself, but you got to do it for the betterment of the team at this point. And it's not to say that, obviously he wants a fresh start, but if this seeps into a couple months into the season where we're hearing, they're still looking, but it's rough out there and, no one's desperate and you can just tell he's done. Like, I hate to say take whatever someone gives you, but
Also, Pat Verbeek might be setting his price still too high. Also,
Which he should right now. Yeah, he should.
yeah, he should. But yeah,
But when it gets to the point that Jake's getting to, then yeah, it's time to just take the best deal on the table.
yeah,
which
Is it? I was gonna
we
say.
we prepped with Klingberg. It may not be what we want, but you know what? Let's just hope it's something.
Nikita Nestorenko, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
Ducks won that trade.
Yep. And with Gibson, like, if this carries on into the season, like, it's not good for him. Like, it's gonna carry a lot of weight on him probably as he's playing out there because he's like, okay, I got to play good to, get other teams interested in trading for me, and then I'm dealing with, I want out. There's a bad defense in front of me. I'm getting peppered with 50 shots a game. It can't be good for him. So if you're gonna do it in the off season.
like to think it's like the Sandlot, but instead of him making fun of the kids coming to the plate, the guy screening them in front, he's like, "Hey, so they're playing like the Wild, and it's like, how's the weather in St. Paul?"
So do you like playing for the Wild?
What's the locker room like?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a long off season, so there's still a lot that can happen. Um, Chris touched on it. We are officially out of the running on Alex DeBrincat because he got traded today to the Red Wings. But
It sounded
there's-
like he wanted to go there.
there's stuff still in the cards. We got RFA signings to happen. We're getting to that point of the off season where there's going to be a slow trickle of stuff, but we can hope that hopefully the John Gibson saga comes to an end at some point. But
Thomas
wouldn't hold-
Tatar, if you're listening, Anaheim's nice in the winter.
I think the fact that we were involved and considered in the DeBrincat talks is encouraging.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I know we shouldn't hang a banner for it, but I think it's a step in the right direction for sure, just to be considered if, for a player like that.
So 40 goal scorers do not grow on trees.
No.
It goes to show that Petrovic is at least targeting the right guys, even though he's not really landing a lot of them. At least the thought process is right. You know what I mean?
He
Yeah,
gets
and
an
his
A. He gets an A
Sorry.
for effort in
Yeah.
terms of choosing the right guys to go after, considering years past have been, oh hell yeah, Yanni Hakanpää, who's he? He might be good. Cody Curran, yeah, hell yeah,
Ugh.
he's a goal.
Daniel Sprong, he's good for 10 a year.
But we've talked a lot about quality of player and being in that, at least being in the conversations, a step in the right direction, because is it realistic 100% of the time? Probably not. Are we in a position where giving up assets for a guy like that make a ton of sense? I could totally see that, especially with some key pieces being still unsigned, in the RFA process. But it's encouraging. It's nice.
At least we're starting to get looked at. Maybe in a couple
Yeah.
years, maybe a big fish will commit to us. Who knows?
I'm willing to bet that the package that Verbeek offered the Senators is more than what the Senators got from the Red Wings. It's just that he probably demanded, or he probably was like, I'm not making the deal if DeBrincat's not going to sign long term up with the Ducks, obviously. So, DeBrincat held all the cards there and wanted to go to Detroit, clearly,
Yeah.
and he got his wish, and the Senators got what they could for him, which was a lot considering they didn't have any
They got a
leverage.
first.
They got a first, yeah. And
I don't know who the
and a bad
defenseman they
prospect.
got.
Yeah, he's not good. He played in the ECHL last year.
Okay.
But still, a first and a fourth, a roster player in Kubalik, and a bad prospect is a good package for someone who had a lot of leverage.
Yeah. All the leverage.
All the leverage.
No kidding. Well, I was very busy this weekend, and with Chris not being able to make it on, Chris not being able to make it on tonight, we didn't grab any questions. I did see one in the Twitch chat, so if you are still in the Twitch chat, feel free to drop them now. We'll run through our little ad reads here real fast. I usually start with 714 and throw in some Angels tie-in, but if you've been watching Angels baseball lately, you are a brave soldier. You're a braver man than I am. But
Giants.
Angels
Giants
might
won the
be
series
bad.
this weekend. Just throwing that out there.
Angels might be bad, but you don't have to be an Angels fan or a sports fan at all to benefit from our code with 714 tickets. You can use code LAP at checkout for 10% off your order, and you get 5% back for any future orders. I I have to make it to my obligatory Angel game of the year, so I'm gonna maybe pick a series that they have a decent shot of winning on paper, but it's not looking great. But as Lou said, if you get on the Giants wagon, want to make a trip up to NorCal, or if you're local and
They're coming to Anaheim August 9th, I believe.
do that, buy Lou a beer, go hang out with him,
I can't make it. I'm busy that series, unfortunately.
or not.
Go see Taylor Swift at SoFi. 714 has tickets. No one else does. They do.
Damn right.
Shout out to all the Swifties out there. Pray for your
Oh,
bank accounts, but
I was listening to that album the other night.
Fire.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
what was your favorite song, Lou?
Back to December. That's a banger. And the Never Grow Up song, that's a good song too.
Oh, I have a daughter now, so that song made me cry.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk? Lou the Swifty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Not me.
Well, again, you can use code LAP at checkout, 10% off any order and 5% towards any future orders. But on the topic of 10% off, our newest partner that we're working with is Shift Hockey. I'm still trying to work out what I want to do with my goalie pads, but I'm definitely going to be looking at getting a couple sticks for some outdoor, some roller skating. Shift's got you covered. Not only do they have hockey sticks, they have gloves, they have merch. We're big fans of very sleek designs of the black and cream line of apparel they have going. I like the fact that all of the hockey specific stuff is a lot cheaper than stuff you find retail wise. Their sticks are retailing about $180. You can buy them in 3-packs. You can buy them in 5-packs. If you want to go as unique as getting a custom curve, they have an option to work with the team and see what they can do for you. But not only do they offer great gear, but it goes to a good cause. I know they have a lot of stuff. They have a program that works with I want to say it's a high school or some sort of club program in Columbus that is a buy one, give one program where if you buy a stick, it provides a stick to a kid that plays as part of the club. One of my main goals now that we're with Shift is I want to try and do that with maybe a couple of the teams locally, maybe help out some of the junior duck teams, some of the OC teams, working in this industry. Hockey's expensive. It's ridiculous that companies charge almost $400 for sticks now, and some of them aren't even great quality. I won't name names, but one of them starts with a B. Causes like this are great because hockey's such a great sport, but it's so inaccessible to a lot of kids just because of that cost to get into things. And having brands like Shift that do things like this to make it accessible for those communities, for those kids, it's just a great thing to see. You want the sport to grow, but hampering that by making everything so expensive just doesn't do it. But you can use our code LAP10 at checkout, and it's 10% off of anything you get in the store. Just can't be partnered with any deals or any coupons they have going currently. So check out our guys over at Shift. We're happy to be partnering with them, and it'll be exciting to see what we can do with them down the line. I think we maybe should get in some talks of doing some lap gear. Get some custom lap sticks.
Oh yeah.
Get Lou out there on some rollerblades or some ice skates.
Oh no.
Well, I do have one last topic from Hockey 365. It might have been a little time sensitive to the playoffs, just given the nature of the question. But he asked us, given the injuries we've seen since the end of the Cup final, do you think we'll ever get to a point where coaches will regularly choose to play the healthy depth players that are on the roster and sit very injured superstars, or is this just the way it's always going to be?
I would
I
like to
think-
think they would play the
Right.
healthy player, but who knows?
I think coaches, like most people in the business, are very they care about self-preservation. And if you
Mhm.
sit your star player for a depth player and you lose the game, you're gonna have your job questioned. So it's gonna take a coach or a management team with a lot of balls and a lot of job security to pull that off and to maybe ignite a change. But for now, I don't see it happening just because everyone's so risk averse.
And a lot of the times, they ask the player, "Are you okay?" And of course, they're going to say yes. Their arm's hanging on by a ligament, and it's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I can play."
Yeah.
So I don't see it changing in the near future. Maybe, down the road, maybe it changes, but I mean, like Pat was saying, like, you got to have balls to say, like, you know what, we're going to play, Brock McGinn instead of Trevor Zegras in this postseason because Zegras is banged up. He's the head coach, and the whole coaching staff and front office is going to get a lot of heat for that, especially if they lose. And I don't know. And at some point, you got to think, okay, how injured is he? And does a Trevor Zegras at 80% or maybe even 40%? That was a big jump off. I don't know why I said 80 at first. Either way, does Trevor Zegras at 40% play better than Brock McGinn at 100% or whatever the situation is? I think that has to be the main question.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can see the nature of this question stemming from, the stuff we've found out about Kachuk, having to be helped out of bed and dressed by Brady to even show up to the rink.
Radko Gudis too.
Gudis,
Well, he actually had to like not play. Like
He sat out a few
Yeah, he had
games.
to set out.
I mean, Ekblad played a lot of that cup final with a broken ankle. Like, to me, I think the only way it would change is if it's either like an injury that was caused by like a violent play, or it's something that just completely like knocks a guy out, like worse than, whatever injuries kept like Shea Weber out. We saw it a little bit to an extent with Kessler. Like, he tried coming back after the 17 run and just couldn't do it because of his hips. That's kind of the nature of having that surgery. I don't think it's very easy to come back from having your hip replaced by a metal ball. But I think it's going to take something super extreme for that to ever be a thought, just because that warrior mentality is so ingrained into hockey, especially at the NHL level, that, like you said, is a guy going to go and say, "Oh no, I can't play. Like, I can't do it anymore." Like, if they feel they realistically could go out there and still do their job, they're 100% going to say yes. Like, it's dumb. Is it bad for your health? 100%. But there's a reason they get paid all the money to do this. Like, they're the best of the best, and they want to go out there and prove that they are. Like, you're not going to change that guy's mind. And it sucks because we've seen a lot of players that their careers I wouldn't say have spiraled, but we always looked at Silfverberg in high regard, and injuries started to catch up to him, and not to an extent where it was keeping him out of playoff games. He was never that guy that was the integral piece that held everything together. But we look at how we view him now, and it's like, oh, okay, one more year and we're not having to deal with his money anymore. Where before it was just like, the dude was money and everything. He could score for you. He was the shootout guy. And it's like, I don't think we realize as fans that they don't, as players, see that like they're entertainers at the end of the day. And they also, on their end, this is their job. Like, do you want to sit out and not that they're going to miss out on money or anything, but like,
Yeah, didn't Linus Allmark play with like an injury in the playoffs?
A lot of guys did. I mean, Olmark.
Like if
Montour.
if Jeremy Swayman plays some of those games, the Panthers might have not have advanced. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess where I'm getting with it is it's hubris. It's wanting to still go out there and prove, you're out there for a reason. But I don't know. It would be it'd have to be something very, very like life altering for it to ever be an option, personally. Well, our one question we did have in the chat, and it's probably good we didn't have too many just because we are pushing 2 hours here. But it comes from JC Lee in the chat, and they ask, which of our prospects, not named Leo Carlson, do you think would or could become a solid NHL top 6 player?
I think Niko Mijatovic intrigues me a lot, not because he's going to be a star in the league, I think, but he's going to be a very good complementary piece. I think if you look at a lot of top lines around the league, there's a guy on most of them who is just going to get in on every forecheck and, be really strong in front of the net and have like good skills in small areas. And, there's you need someone on the other end of these Trevor Zegras, like behind the back passes. And I think that can be a guy like Mijatovic who's going to get the puck for him and then finish his plays. So I guess that's my pick right now. They don't have a ton of like high end forward talent.
Yeah, they don't have a ton that really catches my eye, so I'm kind of gonna go off of recency bias and say Nikita Nesterenko. I was really impressed.
Good
I
one.
I was really impressed with how he played in his short time in the NHL, and obviously seeing him at development camp, he looked really good too. Even though it's development camp, but like I don't think he's ever going to play first line minutes, but I think he's a good, like, at his potential, he could be a solid second line, winger. But right now, I think he's, borderline, top 6, bottom 6, second, third line player.
It is intriguing. It was cool seeing him out there playing with Carlson, getting some reps. The two lanky guys with the very long reach was cool to see out there. I think it would be a stretch, but if I had to guess that if there's ever a guy to really impress and somehow get the minutes in the top 6, I'd say Nathan Gaucher is a good shot. Just because he's one of those guys that's flown under the radar and had a really solid year after his draft year. But you're having to beat out now Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, and if you are insistent on keeping Z as a center, like, he would have to really, really, really take that step above. But he's a guy that I think would be like a dark horse candidate, I guess. But Nesterenko is definitely a very easy choice there, just because there isn't a lot of proven talent just yet. There's a lot of talk of Braden Tracy and Jacob Perreault, kind of the clock's ticking on the two of them. Like, they either got to start getting NHL minutes, or we're starting to kind of look back at those two picks as like, man, they could have been something. And, Chris mentioned that earlier. You're not every draft and not every prospect you take is going to be a slam dunk every time. And you're going to have a few duds, for every guy you get, like a Trevor Zegras, you have a draft pick that's a Nick Ritchie. Are those two completely different players that you should never be drawing comparisons to? 100%.
Unnecessary shot to Nick Ritchie, but
but I mean,
Necessary.
the same.
Every shot's necessary.
I guess where I'm trying to go with it is, there is some truth to that. Of, you get these guys that you're like, okay, hopefully there'll be something one day, and it just doesn't work out. Sam Steele during the 2017 playoffs was that dark horse black ace of like, if things really go south and there's injuries, maybe they give him a shot and he hops in, and we look at where he is now. He leaves us, he goes to Minnesota, and he has a decent year next to Kirill and some of the other guys, filling in, and he doesn't get tendered a contract again. And at one point, we looked at him in such high regard, and it's like that's just kind of the nature of things.
Especially when like their developments were so botched between him and Comtois. And now with Tracy and Perot, like they never stood a chance under the previous regime and how San Diego was handled under Bobo. But I love now that McIlvaine and Cronin are going to have this like communication between the two, and there's a real mandate and priority for player development, especially in the AHL and with all the young talent coming up, that I hope those kind of, that this is the last of those kind of like failed high picks, because it's been a lot so far, and it's tough to see it. I'm, sad for those guys, but I'm glad that it's been realized and now there's an emphasis on it.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction, because like you said, they never really stood a chance when you had the year of Bouchard, the year of who was the coach during the COVID year? It was Deneen.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Deneen, Bouchard, and then Sommers last year. So they're on their fourth head coach, and they've been in the system for 4 years. Like,
yeah,
no fault of their own, but they're reaching that territory of like the ship has to be righted very, very quickly here for them to really get back on track. And is it too far gone? Is it too late? Who knows? But you definitely want to at least churn out one or two instead of like, oh, well, there goes another one, which there's been a lot of that.
Yep.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think this is a good place to stop. This was definitely a very, very content heavy episode. We
Episode 50.
We didn't get a chance to really say it just because we wanted to maximize Chris's time and not keep him here forever. But 50 episodes of Lap, another milestone in the books. It's crazy to think that we're already 50 deep. I feel like
The Antoine Vermette episode.
The Bob Bren episode.
Bo Gruel.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
but-
Bog.
put some respect on Bog. But we've hit a lot of, Lap Day a couple episodes ago, and now hitting episode 50. It's been a climb, it's been a journey, but we keep trucking. It's
Thank you for everyone for all your continued support and listening to us every week.
crossed 120 followers. We're at 121 on Twitch, which
I'm surprised my food takes still keep being allowed.
I was gonna ask Chris that, but we were getting a little close to the time limit there, and we were having a good discussion. I didn't want to derail things with asking him, what controversial food take he had. Because
So enough about the Ducks prospect. What are your thoughts on food?
what do you feel about Kane's toast?
Yeah.
Our pal Lou's not here to defend himself, but we're just gonna roast him for a couple minutes.
By the way, speaking about food real quick, I attempted to make a pizza dough the other day, and just
I saw that.
it's a fucking pain in the ass, dude. If you want pizza, just order it. It's just an easier time. Like I don't know what I did wrong, but like the dough didn't rise. I guess maybe the yeast was bad or something. I don't know. But yeah, it just was a pain in the ass. And messy too. I spent like an hour cleaning my countertop because it was just so messy. Never again.
You just got to get the canned dough, Lou. I know you're a man of doing everything by scratch, but Sometimes you got to take the easy way out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking the easy way out, just call them dominoes or something.
Yeah.
That's the easy way out.
That's the fucking easy way, man.
Yeah, but if you're gonna at least attempt it by making it homemade, like gotta take some shortcuts here and there.
Yeah, because I've always wanted to like attempt to do it because it looked easy enough, but in practice it was not easy enough.
Well, good on you for trying, Lou.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
well,
proud of you.
The effort that counts.
Yeah.
Maybe
Like Pat Verbeek.
Yeah.
maybe one day we'll open a pizza shop and you'll be our pizza man.
I'll decline that.
Pepperoni lose.
Well, if you are still listening with us on Twitch, thank you for hanging out for the whole 2 hours with us. Here we were saying, it's gonna be a short one. But a big thank you again to Chris Peters for hopping on with us. Very big shout out to our Chris for making that happen too.
Yeah.
It was a very shot in the dark, kind of like, hey, you want to do this? And thankfully Chris agreed. And we hope that what he said, not only about Carlson, but just kind of the Ducks prospect system as a whole kind of eases some minds, because it's been a weird 2 weeks.
A little bit.
Which may precede a very weird season, but at the end of the day, we're almost to hockey season again. We're gonna start seeing the prospect tournaments, rookie camp. Next thing you know, it's gonna be training camp, and we're gonna be complaining about the season already. So
It's already
Yes.
July, so a couple
Yeah.
more months.
we will leave you here. Thank you for listening as always, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Adios.